So we're calling it to order now. It is at 7 minutes after 7. Sorry for the delay. We're all running in from other meetings. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you.
I know you've been over at Dover. Frank's on his way. We've got lots of stuff on the agenda and maybe a few surprise little things on the agenda. Meaning budget discussions. So first I'm going to welcome the public. Welcome. And if there's anything anyone wants to share with us tonight, now would be the time. Or if it relates to anything on the agenda, you can hold off till then. It's up to you guys. So tell me what you're just here to. Glad you're here. Of course, we're glad you're here, all of you. I know we have. It looks like we have a student too.
Yes. Can't see.
I know we got posts in the way. Sorry.
Could you
So
introduce yourself?
welcome. Yes. Introduce yourself.
Sam Dutton.
Hi, Sam. Nice to have you here. Is there something you want to talk about now, or is it related to something in the agenda?
I'm just listening.
Okay, great. Well, feel free to join us at any point. Thanks for being here. And I would assume that you're here too for something else besides all the multiple things we have in our agenda.
Jerry Dyke from Wyndham.
Nancy Dyke, Wyndham.
Nice to have you here. So you'll join in whenever? Nothing specific right now? Okay, great. Well, thanks for being here, all of you.
There's one other gentleman.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who?
Tom.
No, I already talked to Tom.
I'm sorry.
He and I made eyes across, and he said,
I
no, he's
didn't
here. That's Tom Connor. Everybody.
Standing over there, sorry.
He is a staff.
That's on TV too, Tom.
We've been doing it for 30 years, Tom. Come on. All right. So anyway, thanks for being here, all of you. We've got additions or corrections to the agenda, and the only thing I was, I thought about it just today, unless I've forgotten, and it's very possible I've forgotten, have we appointed people for the support staff negotiations? I know we appointed Joe and I for the co-curricular, which we've done. But support staff is coming in. I think that the motion was only to support, for us to do the co-curricular. And I didn't have the time to actually go back and look to see whether we were appointed for both.
I can look.
Or we could just add that to the agenda and in fact, why don't we just add it? Frank might remember actually, but I'm not going to plug him right now. Why don't we just add support staff under, we'll do it, support staff negotiations under new business. Because I don't think we've talked about it. And then if there's nothing to talk about, we won't do it. Okay, anything else that anyone needs to add to the agenda? Or correct? Okay, if not, we'll move on to correspondence. No correspondence? Stephen just walked out. Frank, I don't know if you have any correspondence?
No.
Okay. If anything comes up, let me know. All right, we're on to administrative and board reports. First up is Doreen. Doreen has emailed her report along with the additional piece, which is under new business as well, the technology piece. But did everybody get the report that Doreen sent, her principal's report?
Okay, well, it's, I'll just begin. I don't know if you all got a chance to look at it, but I was very curious about our current freshmen, the first students who had an opportunity to take high school level foreign language starting in grade 7. Where are they now? How did they end up? and I am happy to see that the majority of them are still in foreign language and in level 3. So of the 31 who began, 20 are in level 3 at this point. And so I continue to track it and hope that that all of them will complete all the way through advanced placement level, which would be when they're juniors. And as they get more of their requirements out of the way, they would be freed up to take a second foreign language, which is a fantastic way to complement your high school resume and career and college preparation. So it does lead me to question to what extent should we, I'm going to just say kind of in soft quotes here, require foreign language for middle school, because in terms of the way the master's schedule is set up, since the vast majority of them are enrolling in it, then what happens to the students who aren't in that period for foreign language? Because when we look at our afternoons, there's the the music chorus block, there's the foreign language block, and then there's period, I should correct myself, and the required electives period, which is like tech ed and art and health and family consumer science. So what happens to those students who don't choose foreign language? So it's an open question at this point. I know that exceptions would need to be made for various reasons, and I would like to see it get to the point that it wouldn't. We wouldn't even have to bother answering the question, because virtually all students are pursuing it because they feel like, hey, I'm going to Leland and Gray and I'm going to start this high school course in 7th grade and in 9th grade. These students, they earn college credit for it in level 3. So, any questions or concerns about the data? Our foreign language teachers have never been so full. Some class sizes are about 25 students.
Great.
So, yeah.
That's really good
Yep.
to hear.
There are 3 new courses that we're offering. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, how does that compare to other area high schools? I imagine it's very high. Isn't it unusual what you're accomplishing?
I don't have time to
No,
compare
okay,
too much to the area high
Forget it.
schools.
I was just very impressed
So-
with that.
We know that's more than what we have had in the past, that's for sure.
Yeah, good.
And my guess is it's probably way up there if we do compare, but,
I was just thinking of kids tuitioning in to get that. I was
right,
thinking of that.
right, of course,
Other high schools.
yeah.
Great.
It certainly does put us in a good light
Yeah,
in terms
absolutely.
of competitiveness.
For sure.
And it's just really good for kids.
It is.
And the foreign language teachers see that the students in middle school do just as well in foreign language as the high school students. And no surprise to us who are aware of foreign language acquisition. So maybe even better would be 1st and 2nd grade, but that's the K-12 conversation.
Which we someday need to have, but maybe not tonight.
Okay. Anything else about foreign language? Don't mean to rush it. I could actually talk about it a long time. And you don't have the history, Lyndall, but when I first came here and we had some reduction in force because of budget reductions, French was reduced to .67. That would not be possible now because of the enrollments. It is not an area we could look at reducing because of, again, the enrollments.
That's very exciting. Congratulations.
Okay, well, I wanted to share with you the 3 new courses we are intending to offer next year. We haven't before. 2 of the first 2 that are listed, English and Family Consumer Science, replace current electives. So this is not in addition to, it's instead of, sort of retiring electives that we did not have sufficient enrollment to run, or just not sufficient enrollment for us to feel that that is the best course of action, no pun intended. And then you see for advanced placement French, our French teacher is now engaging in the process to become receive the endorsement to teach an advanced placement course.
How did you go about picking those 3 new ones, or what made you pick these as
What do you guys think?
The first elective is a result of combining the 10th grade English courses. So next year, the plan is that there will not be 2 tracks of English in grade 10, which we have done for I don't know how long. And they were pretty different courses covering different material. And the teacher who taught that section is great at it, has invested tremendously in it. We have all of the books and instructional materials. And so that will be, and it could be accessible to students. It says 912, yeah, so 912. So I think it's a popular course. It's certainly in the English department's view, worth preserving the investment that they've made in that. So we'll probably have one section of it each year, and it is right now one section because it's basically called 10-2. I mean, it's the total name of it is like a Atlantic Crossing, America and Britain Reads. That's what it's That's what it's called right now. But it's and again, it was designed for a lower level student. And now next year, with every student being in 10-1 and those who struggled having English support with the teacher of the course, this will instead be an elective that's accessible to all students.
Right.
So I wouldn't say it will be a non-college prep course, but it will be different because it's an elective, and it will not replace an English requirement. However, let's say there's a student who does grade 9, 10, 11 English and say fails 9th or 10th grade English, something like that. We could possibly make, as an individual arrangement, allow the student not to have to repeat a whole course, but instead do this English elective. So because the student had participated in the course, was exposed to it, and that happens in social studies that have, it sometimes happens in math too, but it's always very individual. But that would not be the course sequence that we do, but I just wouldn't say I'd rule it out entirely.
Trust your judgment.
Okay. That's actually sometimes how we think of the foreign language participation as opposed to, like if it ever became a requirement, maybe it would be required to participate rather than pass. This is just in a theoretical stage because it's the exposure, but do we really want to keep a kid from graduating for a course they failed in 7th grade or 8th grade? So it's just something we think about as we want to increase the challenge and the exposure for all students to have the comprehensive, rigorous curriculum, but how high stakes is it? Go ahead.
I think I know the answer to this, but down below, and the second improvement is elimination of low-level courses. So you aren't actually getting rid of biology and U.S. history.
No, just the low-level version of it.
Okay.
That's right. They call it level 2.
Oh, okay.
Sorry for the...
No, that's okay. I was like, that's an
So if I
interesting
could just talk a
concept.
second about the risky business course. So we have a couple of other courses at our school that have like a really compelling title. Like when we started economics, how were we going to get kids enrolled? So if you ever notice, it's called like economics. But we have it as something like, I don't know what it's called, anything, but the words war on drugs is on it. Yeah, so it runs the gamut. So it's like from the black market to the war on drugs or something like that. So it'd be more enticing, and it worked. We always, since we started running it, it had run years ago, disappeared because lack of enrollment, and then we changed the title, kind of beefed up the description, and we've been able to run it every year since. So, and it's mostly traditional economics, I have to say, though, macro and micro. But anyway, so that's why it has this funny title about risky business. But another way conventionally to put it is financial literacy. And each year there has been a request for Leland and Gray to offer a course like this, and it replaces the sewing class that has doesn't have much enrollment or is infrequently offered because of the low enrollment. And it's elective credit, so it's not, although there's a lot of math in the class, a big focus on accounting, but for a student to create their own business plan and the Excel spreadsheets and other, it's a very interdisciplinary kind of course. So, and that is being developed right now by our family consumer science teacher and our co-op teacher. So, and Frank's been pushing me on this for a couple of years.
This is good.
I will tell you, I remember when we didn't have economics here, and then we did, and I'll just say, the gentleman sitting right there across the only staff member we have in the room, taught me economics in this school. It was an absolutely fascinating class, I thought, and I think we called it economics.
We did.
I don't think we called it risky business or anything. And I think it was elective, and I think I signed up for it, because it's a fascinating course, and I'm glad we're back. We've got it on, and kids are signing up for it. Today, more than ever, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
Financial literacy is huge. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
And
Any
we'll talk about
other
Frank.
questions about this? So just to continue what you had started bringing up, Patty, about the elimination of the low-level courses. So we have a Bio 1 and Bio 2. Next year the plan is only to offer Bio 1 and then provide science support through the resource room, because our science electives are so popular. I can't free up science. Every year I try to free up science teachers to be able to provide science support, and it's hit or miss. We have one teacher able to do that right now, but their electives are full, and so I have to schedule them accordingly.
That's great.
And so we have identified that students who would struggle in science are either would receive help from the resource room because it's part of their learning plan, or they're not doing their homework and the teacher needs to bring them in after school. But it is not the same kind of conceptual concerns that we have primarily in math, where you really need to have a support class alongside with the reteaching and pre-teaching. So, and then in junior English as well, that they call 11-2, as well as paired with U.S. history. So, try our best. And I wrote about how we're starting a new club, which is, I would say, decreasingly controversial, having a high school having a gay-straight alliance. And some might say it's about time, and others might say there's no place for this in school. For me, the most compelling reasons are around how unsafe school has been for students who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, questioning youth. Extremely unsafe, and it is the business of the school to make sure all students are safe. In the last school I was in, there were a couple of students interested in forming a GSA, and it was just 2 kids, and this was when a school that had 3 times the population of ours, and the kids were really frustrated because they couldn't get anyone to join, and it was just these 2 kids meeting every week. And I have no fewer than 8 students wanting to do this here at Leland and Gray. So there's, and very enthusiastic. They'll be presenting on Monday to the school for about 15 minutes with a very positive, like, recruitment and not harangue-like presentation. So it's more, it's not an educational piece. They'll decide in their GSA what they want to focus on based on the school issues.
I think it can circumvent or create awareness of any depression issues too that some of these students might be having. You know, just
Yeah, to follow the public research on the issue in schools is that there very much is a much higher percentage of the student population who have attempted or committed suicide, who are homosexual, gay, lesbian, as compared to the general population. And this is really a result of societal pressures and adolescent sexual identification. That is
nobody
really,
to talk to,
Yeah. And,
feeling very alone.
I'm very proud of the progress that we're making as a society. Certainly, Vermont as a state is one of the leaders in demonstrating tolerance and equal rights. So, this is all positive, and I, would have loved to have had it happen earlier, but we're on the right track.
Everything in its time.
Nice to be driven by students.
Yeah.
That's the big.
So if next time you come here and see a gender-neutral restroom sign, that's part of this. Because we don't have a sign like that right now. We have one unisex restroom in the building, which may or may not be enough, but that's something. And
Are you still going to have separate about those?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because we can't have just
Yeah, I was
single
thinking.
use bags, yeah.
I think this is great. My previous school I've just come from a year ago had a very big and very popular, and it was quite a force, as we were just saying. In fact, the students even did some sensitivity training for the faculty on how to teach certain, in such a good way. They were so eloquent and responsive to the teachers. So this is very exciting. This is great.
Barbara runs a great program too down there, and the students, I think, drive that one as well.
I think that's what made it happen at our school. I don't know if I said that in here, but.
No, but it was clear, yeah.
Yeah, that 4 of their students and an advisor came to us and they
Right.
blew our students away. We spent over an hour together and the student council, I don't know what kind of pressure or anything, but it was unanimous. Every student, including those who may never join, but saying, yeah, this is a great
That's great.
idea.
That's good.
That was definitely the inspiration for out of our students.
Great. It's good to hear. I know they've been at it for a long time.
So we may have
Great.
some activities with them in the future because
Good.
they do a lot of events.
Great.
Anybody want
Good to have collaboration. I'm sure someone will step up.
to take the vote?
Who wants to do it?
Come on.
Oh, two.
You want to go for it? You probably.
We can share them.
you
Oh,
probably
now
way more
don't
accurate.
fight.
Don't fight over the priorities.
We usually don't.
Okay, any other thoughts, Corinne, or any questions for Corinne? Comments? Got a lot on the agenda, so.
Thank you, everybody, for your
Thanks for,
support.
thanks for sending this out again as usual, Doreen, early, because it really does help to have them ahead of time. So that's great. When this gets sent out, does it get posted at all anywhere?
I think if you go online and look up
I was thinking, no, I know the agenda does. I was just thinking about Doreen's principal's report. Are they on our website? I just wondered, because it's great to have community members be able to see them early as well as the board. So just that we don't need to talk
If it's not,
about
I
it.
will look into
We
it.
don't need to talk about it. I just thought I'd mention it. It's great to have that information out there.
Is that done by
Yeah,
Allison?
Yeah.
great. She gets them.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doreen. So
Okay,
you're,
go back to me.
you're up next.
Yeah,
and then
I mercifully have no report. Actually, I have to explain that tomorrow night will be the first night I'm home in 3 weeks. So this is just Frank will reiterate the fact that this is a
little crazy
tremendously,
time.
it's a lot of double booking with the boards. And in fact, we're going along pretty swimmingly, but when we got the state statistics on Monday morning,
That was just
Frank
yesterday.
Frank has been like scrambling nonstop. And we've had to reconsider something, so you will see some differences in our proposed budget for tonight, at tonight's meeting. But I did want to call attention and thank those of you who were at the WCSU board meeting that approved the budget, superintendent's budget, so-called WCSU budget, on December the 4th. Was that one last week, Wednesday?
Last Wednesday.
And it was right here. And I just was so appreciative that 22 board members showed up. This is a new record.
And 4 of our own from
And-
Leland and Craig. It was
And,
great.
and we had, all the boards except, all the school districts except Stratton represented. So, sometimes last year we had trouble with quorum this time of year, and I just appreciate your commitment. Because I know it's volunteer time, and it's very important work, but because we have a budget, we at least have that part of our commitments, financial commitments for next year set, so the rest of the school districts can proceed with their own budgets. The important role you play tonight is coming up with a budget so that Frank can properly assess, and project what the budget will be for these school districts that are members of Cleveland and Gray, as well as those that are sending tuition students in terms of the cost. So your work is, timely at this point too. All those boards are trying to vote on their budgets. Townsend's the only one elementary school that's approved a budget last night, and the others are all planning on approving. I think Newbrook, we hope, will be Thursday, and the rest will be the first week or so in January. They have their annual meetings at town meeting day, so they have a little more time than you do your February annual meeting. At that meeting, I'll pass these around if you want one. These are charts, graphs that show what the expenses have been for special education throughout the SU. WCSU, even prior to me coming on board, as far as I recollect, was early in making sure that we were as efficient as possible with our special ed services. You'll see these graphs compared to the state and costs and so forth. They all just give us real numbers and a rather graphic reinforcement for the wisdom of your move as a board and as boards in the WCSU K through 12. And that's why the legislature has imposed that requirement on all supervisory unions in Act 153.
We're just a little ahead of the curve here, which is a great place to be.
Yeah. Well, we tried.
You guys
Anyway,
will have
if
this
you've been at the meeting, you've probably got a copy. I think you got a copy. Didn't you, Ms. Dyke, were you at that meeting? No, maybe you weren't at that meeting. I think you weren't at that meeting.
There's an extra one.
Maybe interest. We'll make copy more of them.
She has one, because the four of us were at the meeting. Maybe the
There you go.
dates would
Take
like
that.
it. Anybody else need one? We can make more copies if you need.
Yeah, I'll make copies later. So the other thing that I just shared with Dover is that we have a graduate student from University of Pennsylvania, Danielle Hall. She's working on a doctorate. She's doing doctoral dissertation, and she's decided, with my approval, to study the effect of autonomy. I don't have the chart with me. I don't think I have a copy left. Of autonomous elementary schools and student outcome in Vermont. Vermont has a strong tradition of autonomous school districts, and so she's taking this on. And I think it's a wonderful time for us to have the opportunity of someone reflecting from the outside how we're doing. Now, of course, it doesn't pertain specifically to your work here at Leland and Gray, because it is focused on elementary schools. But she originally proposed just 2 schools, Newbrook and Dover, but I persuaded her to include the other schools as well, except possibly Wyndham, to broaden her study and actually thereby gain some perspective for us as a WCSU. And it reminded me of my own dissertation, as probably Doreen and Frank as well, that the only way the frontier of knowledge moves in education is through the efforts of individual practitioners, professionals who ask the question and then provide all of the financial means and support to complete a dissertation, to complete a study, and to publish it. And nobody makes, even Frank hasn't gotten rich on his, and he's the money man. But I do remind you all that is one of the strengths, and if you want to call it Achilles heel, or the reasons why we find it so difficult in education, in public education, to know where to go and how to proceed and what is the best practice. Because there is no national commitment to funding research that really would give us those answers. Frank knows this. Sis was right at the issue of what is an appropriate cost of education for an appropriate educational opportunity. And so, anyway, thank you very much for listening. And
Thank you.
any questions? I'll be happy to answer them. But I do know that these are exciting times and difficult times for board members. And I think later on in the meeting you'll be able to appreciate the extent to which boards have difficult position in Vermont this budget season and projected in the future.
Okay.
Thanks.
If there's
Are
no,
you throwing paper across the
At least you could make it into a plane.
No, I considered it, but then I thought that would just be a little bit handy.
if there's no,
And also, I do
Further
apologize for
questions?
eating here too early in the meeting, the public.
that's
there
all
on
right. When you
TV.
go from meeting to meeting,
I just blitz them.
we all get it. All right.
More cookies and chocolate.
Frank, are you up for a report now, or are you?
Oh, I was going to defer to
Defer?
the budget discussion?
I kind of thought you might, but I wanted to offer you the opportunity, just in case.
Since you're right there.
Okay, so we'll do budget with Frank. I don't think there's an update on the red, except that we are definitely holding a meeting.
We're holding a meeting on January
It's not on
2nd.
here, it's second, I think.
Second. Wednesday, the 2nd, at 7 o'clock here. I'm sorry I don't have it on here. And we have held off on a mailing that was going to go
Oh,
out
yeah.
actually last week. And the reason we've held off on the mailing, Emily had appointed, the committee had appointed a representative group to read the content of a mailing that would go out to all the voters, well, actually residents where the voters are not, in all the 5 towns. But we've held off until January, partially because Jamaica and Townsend boards have met already once to actually examine the 25 questions that the Red Committee once upon a time, maybe 18 months ago, 2 years ago, considered in terms of building a new building for the elementary schools to serve the students of Jamaica and Townsend, and following a bit of the model in Newbrook, and Brookline and Newfane. And that initial meeting went very favorably. They have completed the surveys electronically, the board members have, and they will meet on January 13th. So if you're curious about that, particularly members of Jamaica and Townsend, citizens of those towns may be interested in that meeting. It'll happen in Townsend at 7 o'clock. That's a Monday. And I think it'll be interesting to see where it goes from there. I'm requesting that they be specific about the parameters, what they want in terms of a joint school. And then Frank and I can project numbers. And then that may inform considerations further by the committee
For the red.
and for the red and the vote proposed for June 3rd. So
We have a little flexibility in time, but not a lot, so
right,
we're definitely
we'd have
not
to
going
get
to
the state board to
December.
approve in. Yeah, we're not going to December. We could do it in January.
Could still do it in January, but what-
probably February, depending on what our committee decides on the 2nd of January. Anyway,
Okay.
never dull moment.
This
Keep rolling.
mailing that you have
Yeah.
postponed, what is it about?
Well, we felt that the committee owed the public some explanation of what they've been studying, a short summary, and what is proposed. And also ask for any comments if people haven't been able to attend the information meetings. So there's an information meeting in each town. And we feel that this is the time to do it because it is prior to town meeting, the annual meetings for all the school districts, so they know what has happened to date. Originally, this vote was scheduled for October. It didn't happen. So we're pushing things back, and I think the public deserves, a reminder of an explanation of what's happened to the idea or where it's possibly leading.
Links to all the things on the website and also explanation. The other thing I was going to say about it was that if we can do this mailing before we go to the State Board of Education, it would be funded under the grant. And the mailing is not cheap, as you know.
And is it just a presentation of the facts, or do you
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
the pros and cons, do you take sides, do you advocate one way or another?
That wouldn't be appropriate. It's a matter of information.
Facts.
Yeah,
We-
it wouldn't be
If you go to the
appropriate.
website, you'll see what it is, basically.
Yeah, I think once the state board approves, then we won't be having any financial support for the information meetings and the process after that. And then it's up to individual groups or public members if they want to politic for something or do something that's, on their own dime. And I think I'll have to be asking the member districts to what extent as boards they want to put some money into supporting the information. That's looking ahead, though. We haven't gotten there yet. Thanks for the question.
Okay, if there's no other comments or questions? Lyndall?
Yep.
Quick report on that.
Okay, this is a fun assignment.
This is the Wyndham Regional
Yeah.
Career Center
like the
Advisory
notes.
Board, which Lyndall's
And Stephen.
appointed, though, to represent us as the board, so
Yeah, and
I'm going to do a quick report. Just want to make
It's
sure
very
everybody
quick.
knew.
Steve and I heard presentations by two of the sections down there on the 19th of November. One was by the construction trades group and the other from the business classes. And it was really interesting because the construction trades group kids came in with their work boots and their jeans, and the business class kids came in with matching blue blazers, blue shirts, and red ties. And they looked at each other like they were from different planets, very nicely, but they...
Respectfully, but it was.
Yeah, it
definitely-
was rather sweet. Anyway, the construction group was very impressive. They've been making cabinets for Habitat for Humanity in the area. They made a modular home where they did the students constructed the frame, did the electrical work and the plumbing. And the instructor said that many of the kids felt it was very tedious and focused work, and yet they were able to demonstrate to the kids that they really were doing geometry. They were actually doing it, and they hadn't realized they were doing it. So the level of success for the kids was very high. They asked the 3 kids what they wanted to do coming out of this. One said he wanted to go to college for civil engineering because of this course. The other said she wanted to join her dad in his construction industry. So it was interesting. And they're very integrated into the fields of architecture, building, and horticulture within the Career Center. So there's a good cross section. The business group, they're taking college credit courses. They had won a number of prizes, the 2 that spoke to us in state competitions. They talked very movingly about how their confidence had been built through classes in public speaking, in how to analyze problems. And they're doing very interesting internships out in the community with a graphic design group and things like that. So it was very good. The final thing was something called Women Can Do, and there was a really interesting article. This has been going for years. A woman, you probably all know her, Anne Duran, had done it with amazing workshops, tapestry, chop saw, pneumatic nailer. I mean, this is, and the sponsors were very big. 40 kids participated. There was some feeling they wanted more Leland and Gray students. I guess they didn't say it was appropriate to ask this, what percentage of Leland and Gray, but they wanted to have more. And they felt very strongly that it encouraged girls to go into these careers and also to stay in Vermont. They were showing them what was available in Vermont for women in these fields. So it's, I'm enjoying going, and thank you for sending me. And
Thank you for
I'll
joining
read
us.
the report. And we get a good lunch from the food service.
Yes, I know. I've had their lunch.
If you like
Good
these-
assignment.
If you like these assignments, I think Emily has plenty more.
Oh, heck yeah.
I'm going to stick with this one.
That one's a pretty nice one, because I have had their lunches. They're pretty good. Great. Thank you, Lyndall.
Okay, thank
Any
you.
questions or comments for Lyndall?
There wasn't much that was controversial, I have to say.
Okay, we're on old business, so
Okay,
that's the
that's
Townsend
the
right
town
away.
right away. I was just gonna look that up, but I was just gonna say, I'm just gonna convince myself about the reports here. Yeah, you'll find the principal's reports online,
Thank you.
okay? You have to go to WCSU, and then you go to school boards, and then you go to Leland and Gray. And then under Leland and Gray,
It's under
you'll see
reports,
3
probably?
things. It's reports, agendas, minutes, and reports, and policies, which is your business. So now let me get back to my mail. That's my next step, because I do have a motion here in mind. Emily and I met with, does everybody know what the issue is, the right-of-way with Townsend? That we're obliged under Act 250 to have a right-of-way. Okay, well, just to catch up a little bit, and the public perhaps, the deed that transferred this property to Leland and Gray Union Middle School, High School District from the seminary stipulated that there was a right-of-way across the property to the town hall, the back of town hall, and I think it said something about for normal purposes or normal business or something. And I have caught those things, but not with me. And then when we went to a 99-year lease for the property where the fields are on, that 99-year lease stipulates once again that there are 2 right-of-ways. One is to the water in the river across this 99-year lease land, and also, yeah, you got it there, huh? And
I don't know if you want it.
says, well, maybe you want to look at it in case you want to prove it. But at any rate, the problem is that it's very vague. It isn't defined where this right-of-way is across the Leland Gray property. So traditionally, it was around in back of Dutton Gym. And of course, when we expanded Dutton Gym and regraded the land, our engineers put basically a bench, some dirt back of Leland and Gray Dutton Gym, that could, and we put in something that is where the electrical or whatever is that can be driven over and so forth. So from our engineer's point of view, we completed our obligation to provide a right-of-way to the back of the town hall. It's never been used.
It's the same as what it was before.
Same as it was,
essentially,
and
just
it was never
relocate
used.
Slightly.
So the select board wrote a letter had their lawyer write a letter to the Natural Resources Board to say that we hadn't completed our obligations under the Act 250 permit. The Act 250 permit says, unfortunately, that we have to construct a new right-of-way and that it is 15 feet wide and that it is accessible to cars and trucks at all times. Well, that's a tremendous difference in what we thought we were dealing with. But
To
anyway,
be clear, unless I'm incorrect about this, but I don't think I am, the Act 250 permit was applied for under a previous bond.
previous plan.
And a previous plan, the one that failed, and that also included a parking lot behind the Dutton Gym and the Townsend Town Hall. So when that plan failed, we chose to go forward with a new plan that did not include that parking. Unfortunately, we overlooked the little piece in the Act 250 permit, I guess, at the time, that said there was going to be a completed right-of-way behind there, even though there was no completed parking lot. Or funding for it or anything. So, when you're doing things like that, it was just one of those things where we just never looked at the language in there and used the same Act 250 permit. And there we are, but it's only about 30 feet?
Less,
length?
yeah.
Less than that?
Well,
To the Townsend property
to the property line, yeah. Now, at last meeting, you voted on a motion that said, yes, we will agree to improving or at least accepting the right-of-ways being defined from that little apron by the cafeteria, by the food service, the pavement there, and it goes up a little bit of a cleared old trail, no trees on it, that is 15 feet wide and goes up gradually to the back of Town Hall. And the select board, at least I met, and Ed met with David Diesendorf and Kit Martin, and we agreed to that being the best solution to the right-of-way. We were concerned that if something were built, that the safety of our students, so we included that in the motion, I think, if you recall. And that the select board thought that was something they hadn't agreed to. So then we went back and forth. Well, in the end, David Diesendorf, representing the select board, met with Emily and me on a Friday something. It was like 9 o'clock some day. Maybe it wasn't
December
Friday.
3rd, I think
December
it was.
3rd.
That's a Tuesday,
No, that's-
so it might have been the first. It was
No,
December.
I have December 3rd when we wrote the
2nd.
motion. I think we wrote the motion, right?
Next day.
Yeah, okay. Any rate, we met, and fortunately, the select board has, I think, come to their senses a little bit about this, and they now are proposing a right-of-way that is what they call a cut-in from Route 30 between the two buildings on the property line, following more or less the property line between us and the town hall. So that avoids our problem of safety of cars coming in and down the driveway, which we were happy about, representing the board's interest. And
Our
the
big
school
concern is
district.
safety for our students, of course.
And they, so now they're working on that. And then, in fact, that's usually what a right-of-way is. It usually follows the property line between two people that have a joint right-of-way. So I think that's the best we can hope for at this case. They still haven't worked out whether they got to get a 250 permit for that, whether it's too close to the well. We share, they get water out of our well, and our wellhead is sitting right next to Dutton Gym there, in case you want to.
So what's their compelling reason? Why do they need this right away? I mean, beside the Act 250 permit. I mean,
There are some curious members of the public who ask the same question, but they aren't answering. They know, it leads me to believe, well, Kit Martin said this too, the chances of them relocating town offices onto Atherton Meadow or something like that are slim and none. They recognize they don't have support or the money to do that.
They've talked about it for years, but they're.
So they now are working on, and one reason why this right-of-way came up was because they wanted to get a truck in back to work on the boiler or something, and they didn't have any way of getting it in there that they thought. So,
But they do.
but they do. But at any rate, nothing's going to happen too quickly as far as I can see on this, because there are some permits. They have to get the state cut in and so forth. But what they would like to have is now, and I think it's appropriate that, and I recommend that you as a board, rescind your previous motion and clarify your present understanding and agreement or support for their plan. You ready? So, Oh, you had your agenda
That's
here?
the.
That's the revised
oh.
one here, yeah, okay. Okay, so, draft, move to support the town, I'll give it to you so you don't have to. Move to support the Townsend Select Board's concept for establishing the right-of-way for town hall parking approximately centered on the property line between Dutton Gym and Town Hall. The Leland Gray Board's support is contingent on the town of Townsend securing all necessary permits and resolving any impacts on Leland Gray well. Final approval for this new deeded right-of-way will replace the right-of-way referenced both in the 99-year lease of July 14, 1970, recorded August 3, 1970 by Townsend Town Clerk, made between the town of Townsend, the lessor, and Leland and Gray Union School District, the lessee, and in the Act 250 permit of May 2008. We want to stipulate it because the goal here would be to make sure it's clear to both parties forever into the future where the right-of-way lies and what's going on. Anyway, that's my, well, Emily's edited this, so it's our recommended, but I recommend that the board make this motion and approve it tonight. I think it's the best thing we can do.
That's an enormous change, isn't it? I mean, it's nowhere near now the Leland, it's between Dutton Gym and Town Hall.
But it does,
Before
it
it was
does,
between Dutton Gym and Leland and Gray.
Yes.
yeah, but this one actually does go right, the property line is essentially down the middle, what would be down the middle of their road.
Yeah, but it's much better
So-
from our point, and it's safeguarding the well.
Keeps it away
That's
from
the-
school.
The only thing we haven't
Yeah.
mentioned in here, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether we need to add, and David even brought it up himself, the impact on our foundation of the Dutton Gym. I know we, when we, I mean, seriously, this is not a wide space, although in standing there with Stephen and David, you know, when you get out there and you stand and look, it's a lot bigger than I thought it was, so it may not be as much of an impact. But David even mentioned we want to make sure the engineering does support foundations at both the Townsend Town Hall and the Dutton Gym. We found out our Dutton Gym has a 1920 or whatever foundation under it, and I'm assuming it's
Laid up
stacked
stone at
stones
one time.
It is.
on that side as well. So I just want to, you know, I'm just wondering whether we should add just any impacts on the well and Dutton Foundation.
I agree
Where's the
entirely.
well?
Right beside the Dutton Foundation, in fact, between the two buildings.
The
It's
well
quite
is-
close to the Dutton, well, if you look at that map right there, you can see it, I think it's marked in there. You can see it if you stand out there, it's very close to the foundation of the Dutton Gym.
Totally near
It
the
is
back.
our well, but it is shared, the water is shared by the Townsend Town Hall and the Leland Gray. So it's in their best interest to keep the well running, obviously, and running well, of course.
And we're talking of a right-of-way that's how wide? That would go
Probably 15 feet again.
Which would easily fit in there. No kidding, I was surprised.
It would
Quite a
fit, but
space.
with not much.
Well,
Yeah.
they recognize that they got a problem regarding the way their roof sheds snow, so that's something they got to deal with. They understand that.
Our shed's it that way as well.
Yeah, our sheds, our roof is quite as big or as long there, but the thing is that David suggested might be using some parking angled into their building in the summer, and then in the winter just give it up, you know, and just plow straight through the back. They don't plan on having a lot of business back there, but they do want a place for their employees, apparently. That's their rationale when you're asking what the
So for parking.
the goal is parking in back, and they claim access. But I think Emily's point is well taken to
That's
add
on
after
Leland Gray
the,
well and Dutton Gym
and the integrity
Foundation.
of the Dutton, right?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're not doing any damage to
Oh,
that
that's
old
integrity
building.
just in the
I know
Dutton.
they're concerned about it as well, but it doesn't hurt to.
Yeah, and the
Better
Dutton
than that.
Building Foundation, right?
Gym, that's what we generally call it.
Okay.
Anything else?
Anything else?
I know you're not, this is probably the first time you're hearing this motion. Is there anything else that pops up with you, Frank? I know you've had so much connection with the
No,
property.
I think that the water seepage into the basement of the Dutton Gym has been an issue from time to time, so with that addition, I think is very important.
Yeah.
Foundation.
It's, but other than that, of course, they're gonna get the right, required setback from the well, so. you know,
Right, and there,
That's,
yeah.
it's already understood.
they're aware of that, and that's why we wrote that
Yeah.
in there about the well. And any necessary permits that they're gonna need, which may require Act 250 as well. I mean, we certainly were required to do it, so they probably will be too.
Anyway, I'm very happy to see this is a much better solution in the long term, if it's legal and it can be permitted and all that, so let's try to support
There
it.
was, just very quickly, there was a little back and forth about our motion. There was some concern by the Townsend officials that they were questioning who really should have the say over safety of our students. And of course, in our motion, as you will remember, we said the principal. And I would tell you, I would not have backed up on that one if they had come and said that they wanted to have input into the safety of our students. I think our principal, no matter who it is the one who needs to state about
In any
that. So I
situation.
think, and the other concern I did have was clearly, no matter what they needed to do to build the right of way, we were certainly willing to comply with the Act 250 permit because we really had no choice. But I didn't want to build a road to nowhere, which was also concerning me because they hadn't secured their own permit or plan for their side of it. So I was very worried about building a nice road that they were going to do nothing with, even if it was just for a little under 30 feet. So this is a much better solution. And I think, if this all works out, I think we want to support the town of Townsend, absolutely. That's something that is very clear. And I think they've been good to us for the most part. We need to be good to them no matter what. So I'm hoping this will work out.
Did we make a motion to rescind?
Yes,
So
we
I'll
do.
make that
So-
motion the way it is.
Don't you have to rescind the first one, Stephen said something?
I think you should say in this motion that you're proposing this motion at the same time to rescind the motion
So
of
you
the
can
last
state your
meeting
motion
on the right-of-way.
rescind.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll email you the language, so we got it right, but,
For Bruce,
Yes.
who's taking minutes.
oh, Bruce,
that's
okay.
Okay.
It worked fine last time.
It's just make a motion to
Okay,
rescind
so
the
I'd
previous
make
motion
the
first.
motion first to rescind the previous motion regarding the Townsend right-of-way for the Townsend Town Hall. And replace it with a motion to support the Townsend Select Board's concept for establishing the right-of-way for Town Hall parking approximately centered on the property line between Dutton Gym and the Town Hall. I would make our support, the Leland and Gray Board support contingent on the town of Townsend securing all necessary permits and resolving the impacts on the Leland and Gray well and the Dutton Gym Foundation. Final approval of this new gated right-of-way will replace the right-of-way referenced both in the 99-year lease of July 14th, 1970, recorded August 3rd, 1970 by the Townsend Town Clerk, made between the town of Townsend as lessor and Leland and Gray Union School District as lessee, and the Act 250 permit of May 2008.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
I can read.
Okay, Patty seconded it. Any other questions or comments? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, folks. Hopefully.
I'll send you all a copy of this. I'll send it out to the board, okay?
Thank you. Please do. Just as long as Bruce has it, that's an important piece.
Yeah, but-
Okay. Approve our budget. Okay. So I guess who do I turn it to? You, Frank, first?
I have a document I'd like to hand out. It's a
Well, while he's handing this out, as Stephen did just mention to you earlier, that, as you know, we wait for these numbers to come in from the state, these figures, and they have come in, like Stephen said yesterday, and they have not only had an impact on us, but all over the SU and probably all over the state. So we're looking, at revising our budget to some extent, and we'll turn it over to Frank and then the rest of the administrators. This is the last one.
Okay.
Yeah, and we might need
Did we
a few more.
everyone
Have I got enough there?
Coffee?
Frank?
We stopped at me, so I think we need,
Lots of coffees
I
here?
think we need a few
We'll
more.
share it. Oh, you
No,
left
we
some?
got-
Oh, yeah.
Keep passing around this way, Frank. We got you, Bob.
We're taking notes.
Yeah.
Pass it back here.
I was assumed Doreen needs one.
Yeah, she's a copy.
One more.
back.
Thank you.
Quite a few of us
Okay,
tonight.
now
Okay.
any member of the public?
As long as we all have one, you can make them available to anybody who wants one.
They got them.
They got them already?
Yeah.
Okay,
Patty,
All right.
for the-
okay.
Okay, so as Emily mentioned, the state statistics that are published, in this case Monday, had a significant effect on our budget proposal. Our enrollment projections suggested that we had one more year before there would be a significant change in our equalized student. But after equalization process is complete, we received the numbers from the Agency of Education, and we entered them into this document. If you look at page 23 of 23, and you go to the bottom couple of figures at the bottom of the page, even with reducing this proposal from what you saw on November 19, which was a 3.8% increase, to a 2.8%, which is what you see on this document, we are still looking at an estimated tax impact of 12%. And the components of that are, this is the way that is calculated. So in all these figures, we can go into any level of detail that you like, but on page 23, what this represents is if we had done nothing with our budget, simply renewed last year's proposal, all budgets across the state would be up 5.8%. And that is because of those numbers you see toward the bottom of the document. There's a number 9,109. It's called the Base Education Spending Index. And then there's the statewide school property tax rate, 99 cents. Those are two components out of at least 5 variables that calculate the tax rate. Those two alone will produce a 5.8% increase for any school district in the state of Vermont. So when I'm sharing with you that we are at 12.8 or 12.2 in this interim version, that leaves a balance as an impact from what we've projected, what we've proposed. Okay, so using round numbers, about 6% is the state effect on the funding formula. About 2% of the 12% is changes in our revenue sources. And we've talked about tuition revenue being down a little bit. There was a relatively small deficit also that is part of the funding calculation. And then our student population has not risen on an equalized basis. It's actually declined slightly. That's the number you see there. Was 318 students equalized, now 314. So because of those variables, that's lower student enrollment, lower revenues, and about a $75,000 provision for a prior year deficit. That contributes another 2%. Okay, so I've given you 6% from the state, 2% from revenue and enrollment changes. That's a total of 8%. Again, not having considered anything about spending. So now we come in and we bring our spending proposal in, and you see on this document the first line says proposed general budget on page 23. Again, the first line below. Student count 6,999,000, up 188,000 or 2.8%. So that brings us up from 8% to 12.2%. If we hadn't reduced the budget from the version that you had on November 19th, it would have been a nearly 14% increase in taxes. So. So we're, obviously we're still very concerned about the way this will be received in the community, the way you feel about presenting a budget. with this sort of impact to our voters. This is a preliminary announcement of school funding statistics. It is not unusual for those two numbers I started with, which came from the governor and the tax commissioner, to be revised. That's the 9,109 and the 99 cents. It's not unusual, but they don't usually change substantially.
What's driving that? What do you do?
Yeah, why do they do that?
There is a letter, it's a 10-page letter from the tax commissioner that
You all got
that's
it.
very detailed.
Oh, and just, can you do it in
explanation.
a couple sentences?
A couple of sentences. It's essentially they're saying that school spending has continued to rise and enrollment is declining, and you have a funding formula that calculates a tax rate on cost per student. So when you have those two variables which are integral to calculating, it's going to produce this impact. And so the legislature is saying they need to raise more money off the local property tax in order to fund the level of spending that has been approved by our voters at town meeting.
And that's why they don't make the decision until after all the budgets are approved. So they leave themselves, they project this, anticipate this, but they, as a legislature, can decide on some other number based on what happens later on in the spring.
They're also projecting the common level of appraisal, which is another component that none of us control, being relatively flat. And unlike in some years, when you have rising budgets, as long as property values rise along with the spending, it mitigates the need to bring up this index, because the higher property value will raise the higher amount of money. But when your common level appraisal is flat, but your spending still goes up, it creates a gap, and the way you fill the gap from the legislative point of view is raise the base index, and that will fill the gap. So I think
And if it goes down?
if the common level appraisal, yes, goes down, then you have to raise the rate even more.
And it's, you're talking about flat across the state, but there are variables within our own SU where it could be going down in some towns.
That's right, yeah, that has been the case.
And this is Leland and Gray, this 12-2. But as you all know, we all have our own towns and town budgets as well. And I think it is sensible for us to take into consideration what others are looking like too, because the tax rate will be changed based on, it's a K-12. So maybe you could give us some enlightenment. I don't know if you can. I know this is real preliminary for some town budgets, but
Yeah.
if you were coming to us and saying, wow, it's looking so good at the elementary levels, it's just Leland and Gray, that might help us with whatever decisions we have to make tonight about where we're going with the budget. But if you have some sense that we're also going to see some increases that are equal to this or more at the elementary levels.
Yeah, it is too early to give you anything definitive. The only board we've met with these statistics is Townsend. We met last night, and there's contingencies that make it not clear what we're going to end up with. But their equalized students are down nearly 10%, and if there was nothing done to mitigate that, their tax rate would be up 30%. So there's going to be.
So are we looking at equalized pupils going down in the other 5, or however many towns we have here, but the 5 that matter to us sitting here?
Townsend is the most severe, but I literally just got these statistics.
Fine.
We can't
That's
say
fine.
that.
I'm sorry, Frank, I don't mean to put you on the spot about this. I truly don't. The only reason I bring it up was because last year, we, in our own towns, I think you all probably remember, we took a little heat from our spending because people felt, there was quite a bit of talk about how Leland and Gray impacted, the spending of Leland and Gray impacted our town tax rate. And so I think that it makes a lot of sense for us to to take into consideration as much as we can, because while our spending does impact what other people are paying, it is a K-12.
Hey,
Go ahead, Dion.
Hey, Frank. So I just want to make sure I get this number there. So 6% is due to the state, 2% is due to lower enrollment, lower revenues, and deficit. 2.8 is an increase due to our budget.
4.
4. It's 4.8?
Yeah, the difference between the 8 and the 12.2, it's, yeah.
Okay, so our budget's up that much.
Yeah.
No,
No.
our expenses are not up that much.
Yeah. Our expenses are only up
But
to
the impact.
the 2.8,
Eight.
but the impact on the tax rate contributes for about 4.2%.
Okay. Okay. Yep.
If I may, Frank, I'll just share the Townsend Board's dilemma last night. Their expenses were up originally 5.8. They directed administration to reduce, we reduced force in Townsend by 1 person, and we got the budget to a 1.2% expenses comparison increase. 1.2%. Everybody should be pretty happy about that. Frank just told you, it's 31% up on the elementary end of the budget for tax impact. Now, that makes no sense to the public, but that's what I'm saying. You have to be careful.
Right.
The amount of expenditure does not necessarily indicate what the percentage
Yeah.
increase is going to be on the tax rate.
Mm-hmm.
So and then as Emily was saying, that the way the funding formula works is we do define budgets at the town level and the
Union.
Leland and Gray level, and you do define tax rates at those levels. But then at the end of the process, you do a weighted average of the town tax rate and the union tax rate, and that's what you see on your tax bill when our voters pay. So an example of if we did nothing other than these draft documents that we've just talked about, it would be 30% would be offset by, in this case, a 12%, and you'd have a weighted average of those two in Townsend. Now, I would expect that we will be doing something in both budgets to mitigate. The average of those two numbers is still going to be 20%.
In town.
Yeah. So what we have done preliminarily to create a path, and I don't think it's complete, but what we have done is, as you can see, we've reduced this proposal from the one you received on November 19th by $72,000. And those reductions were in three areas. Unfortunately, all in the maintenance area. So we removed $37,000 from the capital plan. On the first page, you see that it's still a significant increase. Capital plan on the bottom from the prior year. But essentially, we're saying we need to defer one of the control system improvements, possibly some of the food service improvements that we had talked about. And then in the maintenance area, we had added $10,000 for additional custodial services. We removed that, and then. We have begun with a $18,000 reduction in personnel, but we have not specified which area. But that's the beginning of, I think, an area we need further discussion. So those changes bring us down to this $6,999,000, which is 2.8% increase. But still a projected tax increase of 12%.
Frank, could you remind us why the equalized pupil count is 314 when we have about 365 students?
Mm-hmm. The main difference is the Wardsboro students are counted in Wardsboro, and we have about 50 Wardsboro students. And the way the funding formula works is that they only want to associate Brookline, Newfane, Jamaica, Townsend, and Wyndham students with the expenditures theoretically that are attributed to those 5 towns. So what they do when you get to calculating the tax rate is, again, on that page 23, they say start with all of your spending, 6.9 million, and then they say take away your tuition revenue from Wardsboro. So if you're going to take away that, you got to take away the student count. And then what you're left with is net spending divided by the member towns.
And then in the revenue, that's where you put the tuition in.
Yes. Yeah. But you can see that that's why it's so important to have tuition revenue. A loss of revenue is the same thing as spending additional funds when you come to calculating the tax rate.
Do you know what some other schools are going to, like some other high schools that are choices around here are going to charge for tuition?
We don't usually get announced tuition rates until January, and I have not heard. I know last year burn rate was 14,500. I would expect it to be a little higher. Brattleboro was lower. Ours this year is 14,522, and our proposal, or actually that's what this number comes out to be, 14,522. And our prior year was fairly similar.
It, surprisingly, it doesn't have much of a bearing on anybody's decision about where to go.
Well, yeah, I guess towns that don't have their own high school don't have this situation. They just decide to go with a per person.
That varies from town to town, depending on what the pleasure of the town meeting is. But
so it could.
well, the board nor the principal of those schools or those districts, nor I have anything to say about what a parent chooses. So the parent chooses, and what you may imagine is the parent chooses someplace that's cheaper so they don't have to pay so much in terms of the difference. But in fact, experience shows that that doesn't matter too much, because the district usually has to pay Leland Gray's rate. It costs the parent nothing to go to a public school, or Brattleboro's rate. Whatever the public school rate is, the district has to pay. In Dover, last year at town meeting, or the town meeting before, they voted to pay any school Burton's rate.
Don't they set their rate based on a certain school? Isn't that how that goes?
If there's nothing said at the town meeting, or they have no vote, it's, it could be by separate article in Stratton, but otherwise it defaults to the statewide average, which is less than Leland and Gray's tuition. Okay. So, an independent school someplace else would only get that statewide average unless it's specifically stated otherwise by the decision of the town meeting, of the school district meeting in March.
It just to me, it just seems from this $9,109 that the state this is their way of forcing us to do what they want us to do. And I guess if we know that that's going to happen, we have to be proactive and figure out a way to, because if we lose what our school has in the direction that we're headed, our property values are going to go down. If our school stinks, our property values are going to go down. If we can't compete, nobody's going to want to move here. And, I don't know what we do, but that's a scary thought to me, because then your home is not an investment. It's a weight around your neck that you can't do anything with.
Why kids aren't buying.
Yeah, but it's
why kids
true.
aren't buying today. They don't feel comfortable in that process.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not something that the state isn't grappling with. They are. I mean, they've been grappling with this. They've seen this coming. That's what all the voluntary incentives have been put out there for governance. I recognize the feeling of pressure or threat, from the state, but the fact is that our spending is continuing to climb as our enrollment goes down, and that's the thing we keep hearing. I mean, Frank and I were at a meeting last week with the Senate Finance Committee chair. They're working very hard to try to hear from us. They've never, ever done that before. They're taking, they're taking feedback from all sorts of education officials around the state because they're very concerned about this. And we should be too. I mean, I don't think we've ever proposed anything that was near a 12% increase here at Leland in a tax rate.
We did have 10% rate several years ago, but this is
It's extraordinary
very
times.
unusual.
And,
There's certain parts of your budget, though, that you have no control over.
Yeah,
Well, speaking of that,
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Go ahead.
bring your attention to the very back page.
Yeah.
Speaking of the standards and the impact, and as you were saying, Patty, what is the state sort of pushing us toward in terms of a minimum level of investment? What the top group of numbers reflect is it's just a simple ratio analysis of our enrollment, the first lines there over the last several years. You can see it's declining, no surprise there. And then the second line is our certified teachers, which includes our nurse and our counseling folks, our social worker, all people that are certified by the Agency of Education. And then there's a ratio. You can see going from 10.2 to 9, and then we have these estimated numbers. The next line down is a recommendation that came out as part of a white paper analysis 3 or 4 years ago from the commissioner. And it was analysis that said, we see enrollments declining and spending increasing at the legislative level, and they're concerned about the tax rate becoming too high for folks to be able to meet the burden. And they did an analysis, and they essentially came out with a statistic, that 11.7, that says if we can all maintain 11.7 student-teacher ratio, we will avert this continuing gap between spending and enrollment. And if you use that statistic, if you simply take 11.7, and the presumption is an average student-teacher ratio, you divide 11.7 into our enrollment. So in that first column, 375 students divided by 11.7 would be a theoretical staffing level of 32. And then you compare that to what our actual staffing level at that time was 36.9. And it says that's what's driving a 12% tax rate. It's the very high cost of operating a small school at that level. And you see we diverged away from that even worse when we had that precipitous drop, which we knew was coming in 13. That's when we had a very large class leave of about 90 students, and we only had about 55 come in.
That's where we had the higher tax rate.
Mm-hmm. And then the present year we're in, this is where we thought we were going to have a 2-year sort of stabilization in tax rates before it really gets difficult.
And why did that change? Why did we think that?
Because of those numbers you see, 366, we went back up. And again, that's because we had the last of the large elementary classes coming in this year and next that stabilized the high school enrollment. Unfortunately, it's the last large class of the elementary, so that was the one where they went from, many of them, 80 students to 70 students, because their incoming kindergartners were 10 fewer than the outgoing 6th graders. But you see, we're still significantly, from the state's point of view, from their analysis of what's a financially responsible utilization of our staff, overstaffed by 5 positions. In fiscal year 15, the current proposal is for 35 positions, and that would be 3 positions over what the state says is financially sustainable. And if we project it out to 2016 and 17, and we follow that guidance, we would need to be down to 28 staff. And I'm sure you can remember Stephen making these projections over the last couple of years if we are going to sustain an affordable educational system. And this is where all the money is. This, it's payroll and benefits.
So what kind of impact did that have on programs and the quality of the education that we offer our children?
Well, let me be clear. Frank's not presenting these figures because this is something that the administration is recommending at this point. What we're trying to do is make sure that the public that you represent and you as a board recognize the seriousness of the situation as we look forward. And in fact, you still have an opportunity with this budget to impose or direct some additional reduction in force, but I have not proposed that nor notified any members that we're contemplating it, any employees, the association at all. I'm a very transparent, honorable operator here, manager. But when these numbers came in on Monday morning, and when Frank put them in this morning in the budget, we took immediate steps with the RIN to try to reduce the percentage increase in terms of expenses to 2.8 as opposed to 3.8, which you had back in November. And but we can still see that it has quite an impact on the tax rate. Now, what the legislature is missing, you see, the legislature is really not that evil. They're trying to make sure things work out and explain to the public why the tax rate keeps going up. And it's hard to explain that when the number of students goes down. Well, what they don't realize, what most people don't appreciate, only those of us in smaller schools appreciate that if Townsend has a class, has a grade 5, and they have 10 students, and next year they only have 8 students in that class, they still have the same expense for the teacher and an increase, but the per student cost is way over what the state considers to be the threshold. Now, the interesting thing about your budget, another indication that really there is some careful budgeting going on here with Duran and Frank and myself, is that we are under the threshold in terms of what used to be a penalty box, they called it at the state level. Now, they did away with the 2 vote, but some other communities had to vote twice on the budget if their budget exceeded that per pupil cost. Yeah.
Actually, to 2 vote, but the threshold.
The threshold's still there. They still have that marker there. They just are not obliging us to have 2 votes.
And we are under the threshold on one measure, but we are over the threshold on another.
Certainly,
measure.
yeah.
And that's also, I think it's important.
It's important. You better point that out on the page there.
Yeah, page 23.
23 again. 23, 24.
Yeah, what Stephen's referring to correctly here, and it's a very important measure from your point of view, I would suggest, in terms of is this a reasonable proposal? You see the 15,500 number. That's where Stephen's saying we are less than
6 lines down or so.
See that? That's education spending per student. And when we say education spending, we're talking about what we spend minus all those revenues, tuition and so on, is a net number divided by essentially the Leland Gray member town kids. But that number represents a exemption of the capital debt expense per student. And the state recognizes that some school districts have bonds and others don't, and it's unfair to simply penalize those that have bonds. So they said you can remove that per student from the penalty calculation. But the number above that, the 16,264, that's actually our spending per student, of this equalized spending per student. And that is above the penalty of 16,168, which is the number above that. And so all we're saying is we're not going to pay an additional tax penalty because we're spending over, but we are going to set the tax rate on 16,264, And that represents more than 23% of the average, the prior year average. So the 16,168, that number is set by law, and that represents 123% over the state average fiscal year 14 rate. So this proposal represents spending 24% over the state average current spending level. That's when you say what's the effect
So-
on program, it's you got to realize that you know, if you look at our neighbors, you know, we're spending substantially more per student than they are. And these are state averages, so you know, you look at Leland Gray versus Brattleboro or Burlington, they're so different systems, and the statistics is a state average.
They're also bigger.
It's
They have
not
bigger
necessary
populations.
comparison schools.
It's
They're not
different.
comparative schools.
Yeah.
It's just.
Right. Now, you probably recall, and I will do this again, as I have every year, I give you a comparison of similar size schools across the state. We have consistently been in the upper third,
Recently, we had.
the higher spending third in the state. So that's, you know, again, we're a smaller, relatively smaller high school in the state, and generally those correlate where we don't have the scale to lower costs. But that's another point of reference in terms of where do we go. It says, well, it's not like you are, you're one of the lower spending in the state, and
So
you've
to get to
already
the
cut.
state average, that would be a substantial reduction in spending.
Yes, it would be.
So since the other format of the budget has been out since the 19th of November, and now it's the night we approve, and this is a brand new look, how does that impact the public's ability to have reviewed it?
Well,
Does that seem transparent?
Yeah, well, that's up to you in terms of the board representing your public. The adjustments that were made today really are not, I don't think they're very controversial. I mean, I think it's a matter of tough decisions, but it isn't a matter of cutting program. It isn't a matter of cutting any specific program or anything. There is a projected savings in personnel that we hope to accomplish through attrition or through hiring differences, and it may have to do with some people that are within the master agreement or not, but I'm not prepared to speak to that.
Yeah.
I think honestly that the proposal we're seeing in front of us is the only one that sounds like the administration felt
That-
comfortable coming forward with.
That's right.
They expect us to represent our taxpayers and tell them we either want to go up or down from that, and or stay with that. You know, this is
Yeah.
the small bits of discretionary spending that we know are in there. They've gone after today.
Right.
Looks like, and when we go deeper than this, we're probably going to.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that it would take some pretty serious look at personnel, and that means programs and so forth. And I asked Frank to present these projections on the back page, FY 15, 16, and 17, because the decisions we make tonight, or that certainly should be preparatory to making another decision when you look at FY 16 a year from now.
We're looking
And
worse.
FY 17. There is not light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm sorry to say that some of my predictions have been correct about what number of reduction of force we have to endure here. Now that means that we have enough of the doom and gloom. That means we have an opportunity, Leland Gray,
Right.
to reform our program even more significantly than our very able leader has done up to now, and to reflect on how we can proceed in a way that is
With our programs
cost-effective.
and reducing
And
spending.
Understanding this
and
is the
do
future.
challenge.
guarantee the same learning opportunities and equity, equal opportunity, And that will be a significant challenge, but I do think we can't decide on that tonight. That's why the administration is not presenting anything more draconian or recommending anything more draconian at this point. But I do hope this sets the stage for, a rather inclusive and broad discussion about how we can proceed in the subsequent years, looking forward. Now, this pertains also to our consideration of the WCED, the red. Obviously, if we had voted a red in October,
Yeah.
we would be in a different budget scenario.
Right.
We would be benefiting from some tax breaks, and we would have some money to fund the transition from the state. Well, I'm not crying over spilled milk. I mean, it didn't happen. It wasn't ready. I don't think people would have voted for it in October anyway. But I certainly hope the public will consider carefully what the future is, both from the point of view of their small individual town and school, and the Union School District, and the WCSU and the region. I mean, the red doesn't speak to the region or the WCSU, but it certainly, these kinds of projections beg the question, what are we doing? Where do we think we're going?
Well,
We're providing education in the future.
Stephen, when we go back to what Bauman asked about the information we're sending out in January, I think these two, to me, tie together. I mean, we're saying we were going to send information out on just facts on the red. Well, these are the facts. So you gotta be strategic on how you do that. You can call it an opinion, but these are the facts in front of us.
No, that's not opinion, that is facts.
Right,
It's
so when that
projection.
goes out, I mean, in order to get that going, if that's gonna be the solution down the road, that's gonna be pretty powerful.
Well, just
to
thinking.
say that.
Well, in response to that, just thinking ahead a little bit, if we get to March and April, the budgets are approved, or not approved as may be the case, but at any rate, when we look towards that June vote, if it's approved by the State Board of Education, which I expect it will be, then in those information meetings, we can actually look back and say, okay, now what if we already had a red in place? What would our tax rate have been different on March town meeting if we had this in place? Because then people are comparing facts to facts. They're
That's
not
what-
comparing
we're not there
projections. Quite often, the public is rightly suspicious of people like me or Frank projecting some numbers, because they're just skeptical about numbers in general.
So what, if a red existed right now, would we also not be here in our little bowl and wondering what Jamaica's little bowl is going to be, and wondering what
If all
boards
5
were-
towns were in a red, we would
we'd
be
all
talking about
know
one
all
budget.
the little
and we all-
bowls and
be
what
one
we're
budget.
talking about is a big, so we could.
Nobody's going up against each other like I feel like we're being
Right.
toward them right now.
But would it be cheaper?
Well, no doubt there are
Won't be more
efficiencies to
expensive.
be able to, that's what
Right.
I'm saying. I think
Won't
you're
be more.
saying, well, would it be cheaper? We'll definitely know that in March, if we approve these budgets in these various towns and people see what their tax rates are. Frank can go back and say, well, now, if we had 2 cents, 4 cents, 6 cents off your
Yeah.
tax rate, where would you be? Well, you'd be in a lot better shape.
And if you take
Be
all
easier to
of
make
your
it cheaper.
students and your teacher-student ratio as a whole,
That's right.
and being able to utilize all of those teachers throughout the whole system.
Magically,
That's
the
how,
the
and
buildings,
with a lot of other things.
the buildings
as
and the
well.
schools would still be there. Nothing's going
Yeah,
to
I mean,
change
the
by
infrastructure's
magic
there,
there.
the
Right.
students are, the teachers are there, so
But-
where is the?
But it would be in staffing. I mean, we've talked about it a zillion times. It would be in staffing, it would be in.
An
I'm sorry, go
example is where you have Newbrook
But if you
with
don't
almost identical number of students as Jamaica and Townsend. Newbrook employs 23 people. Jamaica and Townsend, serving the same number of kids, employ 33. 10 more folks, 600,000 more. So it's not like you're going to turn the key and it's going to look just like Newbrook, because there are different dynamics. But you do have the opportunity of reallocating that staff so that you have more reading intervention, more math intervention. So but you have 15 kids in a classroom instead of 8. So
Is
there's
that assuming that you've consolidated the 2 schools?
it means collaborating And
Or
it
could-
could mean
it could be-
consolidating, but it could be just
It could be
different
both.
grade
It could be
levels
either
at
way.
different buildings, you know. and
It's the
that's-
flexibility.
Different
as I-
specialty
as I-
services.
It gives you some strategy to work with.
Right.
It's,
Which you don't
it's
have.
very strategic and you can
How you choose to
develop a
do it
long-term.
would be up to the towns. and
The
how
larger
they want to
increase
go.
in Newbrook was when they decided to close Brookline, but there was still, when they had a proposal out there to keep Brookline open for K-1, 2s,
Yeah,
there was still a reduction in spending.
I want to keep the kids in the small town.
They just got a bigger
The
reduction
younger
in spending
kids.
because they decided to close it.
But
So-
Stephen was saying that the state was ready to cut a check for, was
Yeah,
it $400 a student?
Yeah, it's,
You know,
it was
so-
400 per
so-
student or the two,
You know,
468.
300,000, you know, and
8462.
that would have substantially.
Just for creating a rec.
Transition, yes. That would substantially help with the transition, because inevitably there's going to be inefficiencies in those first couple of years. And they understood that, so there was the path for avoiding. Another nuance I want to dwell on, but we might want to talk to our legislators, because they could fix this. For example, in Townsend, there's a hold harmless, will not go below provision in the law that says if your enrollment drops more than 10%, you're not going to pay. You're only going to be held at a 3% impact. But they didn't foresee union schools like Wyndham and Townsend, where a K-6 enrollment could go down 10%, and the 7-12 enrollment could go up 6%. That's exactly what's happened to Townsend. So the K-12, the whole thing is only down 1%. But Townsend is going to get hammered because they went down
The tax rate,
10%,
the elementary.
and the legislature didn't foresee,
No whole
let's
class.
They're
let's
different
mitigate
schools.
that tax rate. In 30% is insane. Let's cap it at 15. They didn't do that. So maybe we should talk to our legislators about a technical correction. They could do that this year, and that could make a huge effect on our towns that are having this dynamic. Townsend is the worst dynamic in what I've seen so far, but I've only got through.
Is that information getting to the legislature? And then
I've raised it with the AOE, the Chief Financial Officer of the Agency of Agency of Education. I talked to him today about it. I said, just checking, this is an insane impact on this community. Did you follow up? They're aware of it, but he said it's the legislature's discretion, and they elected not to deal with it last year. So.
And I think if we want things to change, we have to lobby the legislature, certainly, and call their attention to this. But we have to give them some solution or some direction to go. Because after all, if they make a technical adjustment that costs $12 million statewide, they got to know where the $12 million is coming from.
Right.
I mean, you know, I'm not one of these people who just gripe about things and not give some people direction, somebody an idea where to go. You know, I'll say, okay, put it on the income tax. I mean, you know, that's the most progressive tax we got. That's my own political view.
So this is just kind of looking out, you know, I mean, the public employees receive really great benefits with respect to healthcare, et cetera. Now, in 3 years out, the public employees will be getting getting their healthcare through, you know, the state
exchange.
State exchange. That should make a favorable impact,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Theoretically, but it's definitely open to negotiation, and everybody is positioning for this transition. And right now,
Meaning, what do you mean?
Well-
Meaning that if we're in negotiations and we're not spending the money on health insurance, we probably are going to have to find other ways. We will be asked to pay up in another way. People are going to take a reduction.
Well, if they want to
Their
keep their
salary.
jobs.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I mean, I'm just
really.
saying, it's not something that we get to decide.
We don't
It's a
control the
matter
whole-
of negotiations, and we will have to go through that process. And it's very possible,
Sure.
it'd be great if it was a savings for us.
Yeah, but I mean,
Might not be.
don't you think the prices is just going to come down for healthcare because of the the restructuring? I mean,
Right.
that's the goal.
it is the
It is the
goal,
Affordable Care Act.
and it seems plausible.
Yeah.
It seems logical that
I mean,
that would happen, but
Yeah, we're definitely seeing it on individual levels.
yeah,
Yes,
Seems
we are.
fair.
Fairly substantial.
but
For individuals
Yeah.
who are paying their own right out without employees.
Yeah, I'm
Right
just
now
saying
they are.
in general, the cost is going to come down, so that should help. Even, I mean, I know the enrollments and revenues, et cetera.
But a lot of people who feel the exact opposite,
Um,
but I agree with you.
Yeah,
The whole-
that was the whole purpose.
Well, I
Actually, yeah.
Well, I had some employees in my office asking about this, and I got into the hand direction here. Our society has a disparate amount of health care and cost. Some of us have health care at this level,
Right.
and some of us have it at this level.
And some of us are
Now-
below the table.
I don't think this should be big news to everybody, but if you're going to have equalized health care to everybody, this is going to come up, and this is going to come down.
And that's what we're looking at.
You know, we're not going to have the
That's
same
good.
benefits, those of us that had Cadillac plans before. We should not be expecting
Right.
that if there's universal health care, we're going to have the same Cadillac plan, that we've been enjoying
It's gonna be more
at the cost of our employer.
And
Right.
hopefully,
And-
the idea is that people will be healthier when they actually get to a doctor. which
And
is
that
what
will
we're
reduce the
hoping, but it
overall
probably won't
cost
help.
and
Well,
efficiency.
plus-
I'm not objecting to the plan at all, but I'm just pointing out that we should not be dreaming about where the free lunch is here.
I'm not dreaming, but dreaming where the free lunch is.
Yeah, I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying that in terms of us as
I'm
employers,
with you, Dion.
Yes.
in terms of us as employers, we should not be counting on a dramatic reduction, because the cost for the healthcare system, even if we go to universal single payer in Vermont, will be borne equally across the whole system.
There's a lot
And
of small
in the
businesses
end,
who are
no
saying
doubt,
that
it
right
would
now.
come down.
It will lower
But
costs.
initially, and everybody, as Frank says, is advised in terms of professional bargaining with the teachers' associations, is to just, agree to stay where you're at right now. Don't do anything radical, because you can't bank on where it's going to go. Right now, we don't have to negotiate, so we got another year.
I myself am I'm a layperson. I don't, I'm not someone who studies models of budgeting, school budgeting and things like that. Could we, when we get to a point where we're trying to figure out, I hope we get started on this right off the bat for next year, not wait until September.
No question.
Come up with some strategic things, figure out a model. Maybe if the administration knows of some creative model that they've been presented with, on budgeting, how to get through tough budget times, and how to maintain your programs, but still do what you have to do for budgets, and follow a model, pick one, and try it, and be strategic, and get an early
One of the
start.
things that we can do, I agree with you, I think we need to do that. One of the things we could say right off is that we want to change the average class size. When Frank mentioned this 11.7, that was just a recommendation for average class size across the state, but actually, secondary, if I'm wrong, tons of people will correct me, I'm sure, but secondary, I think, is expected to be a higher class size, so even if we were heading to 11.7, we're still below what probably they're projecting for us for secondary levels, and we are, we're below, as we know, the 11.7. So, even if we went at it from that direction alone, we could say, none of us sitting here want to damage our programs. We know that our programs are what bring kids to our schools, and we all know we need tuition students to be able to maintain the programs. So we've got to find another way.
Yeah, there's got to be something out there that somebody who's a professional at this has figured out a model. It's a successful model because student outcomes are good with this model, and this is what you do, and there's got to be
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm excited about the bad news, because that really is the responsibility of educational leadership. And you are
Right.
part of that team in terms of providing education.
Yes, we
Now,
are.
the challenge is that whenever a model is looked at or proposed, the vested interests, the clients we serve, our students,
Right.
the parents, all have their own idea about what they want to get out of education. And change, the reason why change doesn't happen in education is because it is inclusive, and so everybody needs to have a stake in it and have some say.
Right.
So, I just want to caution you against feeling that it's just a matter of Durin and me getting to the library here and looking up some models and finding some magic thing. We're well enough aware of the various, approaches that are out there, and the question is, what can we convince a significant, a sufficient number of our employees and our parents and our students to believe, to envision, a future that is promising for all. And so the envisioning process will be quite labor intensive. I mean, it'll require some time and consideration. If there were a magic silver bullet pill or whatever you want to call it, I would have pulled the lever already. And, but the challenge will be to gain sufficient support for people to feel that it is the best that we can provide, and not a compromise of the excellence we expect.
Right.
And I think it's exciting times.
It can be looked at as an opportunity. We have opportunity.
We got to look at it that way. If
Yeah.
you don't look at it that way, you
It's
might as well
not
just close up shop and tuition kids out.
So, I hate to knock this short, but we do have to make a decision on this budget. And we can, we can go the gamut. We can stay with the budget we had before. We can go with a recommendation tonight. We could also say we're not okay with the 12%, and we're not going to, we don't, as you know, change the budget as far as programming and all that, staffing. But we can say we want to take it down a little farther, whatever. So it's up to this board to decide whether you're going to be able to swallow with your voters the 12%, with a 2.8% increase in spending and a 12.2% increase in tax rate. Bruce?
This is the exact spot where I got murdered last spring.
Let's revisit.
I went back to Jamaica.
He survived that murder, but
Barely.
barely.
There are people who won't talk to
But
me.
I do know this is what we were talking about.
Good.
That when the townspeople saw what Leland and Gray had for a budget, they were outraged that it impacted the final tax rate, even if they were wrong in their thinking on, I don't even know what they were. There were houses floating down the
Yeah.
river that cost money
Yeah.
in this area. So I am extremely concerned that this is going to create the same situation in the spring when Jamaica folks look at this budget. I mean, really concerned. I don't know why Patty didn't get involved in it more. Not your fault, but
Well,
Just
I
be
think it was
grateful
during
for
the
it.
red discussions you had
It
more
must have
contact
started.
with.
But it
Started
wasn't
there.
just Jamaica. I mean, we felt it in Newfane a bit too. The same pushback.
But it sounds like the elementary schools might be in the same situation this year, that they're going to be hard pressed to beat 5% or 3%.
Well, yeah.
Which means that if ours is up that much, it's going to be even a bigger impact.
Well, in Townsend's
But they
case,
can't just blame us.
last
Well-
night, Townsend's budget was approved under the assumption that you were going to vote your budget from November.
Yeah.
Isn't that correct? We didn't change
They
it.
didn't have a contingency for mainly Gray.
No, they didn't.
It's-
But it would have if you reduced here, it would have a positive effect for Townsend.
Well, it would have a
But
positive
Townsend,
effect on everybody.
Townsend was,
5 times.
sure, but Townsend is the only one that's voted their budget already in terms of the elementary school. So Townsend is actually thinking, well, Leland Gray's done us a favor. It's not 31% impact on the tax rate. It's only 16. I mean,
nice.
misery is a
Assumed-
relative experience.
Yes.
Which
So the
isn't-
Townsend board will be thrilled with them.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
With what we've
Townsend
seen
board
tonight.
would be
And I
pleased
can
to see
tell my
that this went
taxpayers,
down.
we did a great job.
But, I'm just saying, it's expectations, too. And if you're correct, reflecting on Jamaica, that Jamaica wants to make sure that the Townsend budget has an equal or lesser impact on their tax rate than the elementary school, then we got a whole new puzzle to figure out, because you can't figure that out tonight or even in the next 2 weeks.
And if we have the impact of common level appraisal, like Newfane did last year.
There you go, that's a brave way.
That'll be even more ugly, because we certainly felt that big time. I mean, I'm sure, and you heard people say, I can't believe my tax bill. Well, and I got a lot of feedback and heat on that last year.
Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that all your member towns are going to go to the ballot box and vote on the Leland Gray budget.
And that's what they didn't seem to do last year from Jamaica.
Well, they
waited-
wanted to
They
complain.
waited until town meeting
Yeah.
to get wound up about it, when they could have had an
Well,
impact
so-
earlier.
Yeah, certainly, and sometimes they don't get fired up until they get their tax bill either. So, I mean, it's, doesn't really matter when, it's just if we're impacting them, they're
think
gonna
you're
tell us.
allowed-
What's our deadline to warn a budget?
It's this
Unless we
month.
hold unless we hold
28.
another meeting, we'll warn it. The actual warning will go out, just before the new year.
Usually the 28th of December.
It's usually
Tell
that
you-
week
tell
between
you, I'm
Christmas.
not real comfortable with the 12% tax hit, but I think I'm less comfortable with taking a red pen to the budget without some careful consideration. I think that's
That's
kind
why
of
we
goofy.
That's why we recommend what we
And
recommend at
unless
this point.
Doreen has some additional ideas right now, I say we pass it as is, and if the voters can't swallow it, we'll at least have 3 months to.
I'll second that.
I
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree.
That makes sense.
Can I make a motion?
You certainly can always make a motion. I emailed you the warnings.
I make a motion that we approve the budget as presented, the 12/9/13 version.
Just use that number. In the amount.
Boy. $6,999,318.
Second? Again.
Sorry, I'm trying to, it was moved and seconded? I'm trying to, I was trying to get the, just send it to
Articles.
Stephen, the articles, the warnings.
There they are.
Oh, did you get it? Okay. So it's moved and seconded for the 6.999318. Any other comments, questions, thoughts?
Doreen, what do you think?
I
the
take it you
impact-
had no magic to pull out of your
Yeah,
head.
she
Yeah, is this
doesn't like being on the hot seat here to try to pull something out of your
totally mess up your plans or your,
Well, the
Moving
reductions from the maintenance budget really concerning.
yeah.
Something between 60 and 70% of American public schools need significant infrastructural repair.
Can we write a grant?
What grants?
I don't
mean,
know.
I'm amazed that when I first got involved in education in the 90s, I had my pick of the grants. State,
They're all going up.
federal, private, foundation. It's a very different landscape right now. And the grants that I see are, the institution says, we have this program and we'll pay you to carry it out. And it's not necessarily, and it often is not, best practices. There's no research basis. It's usually something to do with forwarding the ends of that institution and not the ends of our commitment to public education. So, I mean, I'm sad about the cafeteria, that we cannot move in that direction. The need is great. And I think we're well aware of the other maintenance work that we want to do in the building. My only hope is we'll be frugal enough this year that we have enough of a surplus at the end of the year that we can work on some of these areas because of the surplus at the end.
How much longer on our bond, on our existing bond do we have?
We have two
What a number of
bonds.
years.
Yeah, we have two bonds, and I put that in there just so I don't have to remember it in my head. But that is on page 20. Yes, and we have next year the last payment on the smaller bond, and at the $23,000 is fiscal year 15. We have one more payment, so then that would be a nice contribution to what Doreen was just referring to, if we just were able to dedicate that $23,000 to continuing improvements. But the other one, the one that we've just done, the science,
2028.
the Dutton Gym, the improvement in art in 2028. Yep,
Oh, so
that's the big one.
I think I'll be around for that one.
I don't know if I'm
Go ahead, Norman.
allowed to ask
This,
this,
of course you are.
but I heard the other day that over the next 10 years, some 4,000 teachers in public schools in Vermont will be retiring.
That same thing.
A lot of those are people who are on the upper end of the pay scale, and they will be replaced by people who are on the lower end of the pay scale. Is that going to affect us?
It has been affecting us, yeah, as you probably recall, I can think off the top of my head, 5 teachers in the last 3 or 4 years.
So looking out like the next 2, 3, 4 years, I know it's always hard to
Yeah.
gauge that.
Not as many, but there are some, yeah. So it's hard to predict. But, there's no mandatory. So
I just have to throw a little, I retired last year at age 76. I'm sure everybody was looking at me for. And I was still there. No, I agree, it's very
Well,
hard.
thank you, Lyndall, for that grounding
Well,
tone.
so you can't predict.
No, I know.
Yeah, it's a good
I think
point.
they were hoping.
I think it's what it's been over the years. It's been a trickle, and I think it'll probably continue to be. As you know, economics have been tough, and a lot of people have decided to, even if they had planned on retiring, have felt that they didn't feel comfortable retiring yet financially, and so they've stayed on. That's true of every sector. But
I hear you asking, is there going to be a statewide impact of the 4,000? So not just the Leland and Gray impact, but with that huge number of retirements, will that reduce costs statewide in terms of taxes?
At an aggregate level, yeah.
Yeah, so does anyone know?
Is that
Answer that
unusually
question?
high, or is that just a norm for?
we just happen to have this. It was, I think I heard it on the radio.
Yeah, we
It was
probably
a
heard this on
study,
the show,
yeah,
yeah.
and it was basically just saying that, we just happen to have a very high number of teachers in the
Older
state of
teachers.
Vermont
Older
who are,
teachers,
who are beyond the.
Well, it's consistent with their general demographic, which is
Absolutely.
we're the second oldest state in the country.
Second only to Maine. And things are not looking good, if you all heard about on the radio today about Wyndham County too. It's pretty scary, and that's even without the loss of Vermont Yankee. There have been some real concerns about Wyndham County. Pay is down, we're not able to keep kids here, kids aren't staying in this county more than any other county. We know that's true of the state of Vermont, but unfortunately, Wyndham County, it's even worse. Things are a little more glaring here in Wyndham County, so I hate to
Not
be
only
negative.
kids,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
it's like young adults.
Absolutely,
in their
that's exactly
30s
right.
Who would have
Having kids.
children who would come to
Exactly,
the public
Norman.
school. They're not
Exactly.
moving into the area,
That's
and
correct.
those who are here are moving out for economic reasons.
That's why I wonder, is there any discussion at the state level that the state owns part of this problem? I mean, the number of kids, our problem is
All
not
the
just how we run the school, it's how many kids we have access to.
It's how business can
the center of
perform
their-
here, how you can run a
Can't bring the
business
kids in
here.
the state, we can't teach, we can't make them, we can't make it work.
You know it, I don't know how, I don't know what they mean, they talk about
Right,
economic
right.
development all the time, that's what the thing was on the radio today about it. It's just, but there's no silver bullet, just like there isn't for us. It's tough.
Yes.
Our property values, our property expenses are very high, and the people who come by here, buy homes here, are often retired and
Yep.
fairly well off.
Yeah,
So that's
Yeah.
what's happening.
do our public.
So can we make the motion, can we vote on
We
the
have a
budget?
motion, yes, so is there anything else to discuss?
Does the
We're
public
not
have
on the
any
budget right now.
thoughts on?
Before we vote, it's a good point what Patty just brought up. Any thoughts from any of the three of you left in the room? We drove Tom right out of the room, but any thoughts? How about you, Sam? Thank you for sticking this tough conversation out, all three of you. Okay, if you're ready to vote, I think Deanna is.
Yes.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Okay, Stephen is still working on making
got
some
it.
changes on we need 2 warnings, one for Australian ballot and one for the regular annual meeting warning.
We don't need the auditors anymore.
We don't need auditors anymore, we removed that. But I think we need everything else.
Sorry for the panic, but I know that was something definitely.
So I think we can make a
Lost hope
motion
yet,
to
and maybe
approve the
something
warnings.
here.
Yeah.
We need federal money. And
The
that's
only
really
changes
what
we're
built
making are
this
changes
whole
to
thing.
dates and times, and removing the auditors from the main warning.
And they gotta be amount of money.
And then, and the amount of money has to be in there for the informational hearing, and then for the Australian ballot, it's just the change in the money, unless you guys have any sense that you want to change when you vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
You leaving too, Sam? Nothing else you want to share with us?
Hey, Sam, I just wanted to invite you or any other, your student here, right?
Yes.
This board is actually supportive of the concept, or supportive and solicitous of having a board student member of the board.
That is true. We've
So-
talked about it a
Too.
We
lot.
might spread the word, but that certainly is something that, you're one of the few students that have come and stuck out a meeting, so you may be interested politically or otherwise, but
We might be reaching out to you.
this board is particularly interested in being inclusive of student opinion, and I certainly am. And so there are other boards in the state that have, including our State Board of Education, has a student member who votes. So that's something that we have not, in my career, when I was middle school principal for 10 years, we never had a person who had sufficient interest or commitment to do that. But it is something that we've tried to welcome, and we've just spread the word among students.
We've
like you said.
talked about it over the years. A lot of times we've asked administration about this and asked them to go to the student council and find out whether there was any interest. And honestly, the feedback we had from previous administrators, because I don't think we've actually directed you to go toward this, but we have in the past, and students are busy. They're really busy and didn't have the time to commit to it. But I think, as you heard tonight, there's a lot of stuff going on for us, and so it'd be great to have a voice at the table from the student body. So I thank Stephen for mentioning it to you, and if you go back, share with your fellow students, maybe talk to your administration, your student council, whatever. See if there's any interest, and let us know, because we're interested.
All right.
So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Night.
It would be great for the board to direct me to
Well,
recruit a couple of students.
I was just going to say, I mean, we stopped having students on
I'll
the
make a motion
agenda.
that the board direct Corinne to invite the students to
Second.
board meetings.
Second motion.
We voted on the budget.
Thank you. I missed it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? We used to have it, but they didn't want to, they stopped coming
It's a
because they
really
couldn't do it.
excellent
So
idea.
I hope the motion, which I'm hoping you made sure Bruce heard clearly so you can get it in the,
I heard enough of it.
He'll make it up
to
for you.
invite them. Because I don't
I'll
want to
make
put any pressure on
something
them.
Do you know that I'm the student
Yes.
council co-advisor? So that started about a year ago. So Karen Meyer and I share the responsibility.
Well, even better. When I first got on this board, the student council sent a representative to every meeting.
Wow.
How long ago was that?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
10 years ago. Student council member attended every meeting.
Yep, they were student council members attending pretty nearly every meeting.
It wasn't
They
always
usually
the
come
same
in
one, they
twos.
rotated.
That's right, they rotated.
So your motion was
Same with staff.
directing Doreen
To
to
invite,
select them or
To solicit.
Invite.
Excuse me.
To
invite a
invite.
specific person?
no,
Invite some.
Invite.
Student representative?
Student representative. I don't think it needs to be the student council, it can be
So
whatever you
one
want.
student representative to be on the board?
No, two,
Well-
so they could alternate or rotate or.
I think that, we made a motion and approved it, so I hope
Oh.
that this is. But,
Oh, I'm sorry.
but.
well, I
but
guess
what
in my
we're-
vision, I would be going to the student council and throwing it out there
Well, that's a place to start.
and let them determine
Honestly,
what they'd like to say.
That's I thought, what I thought your motion said was to have you approach the student body and see.
Yeah, I think she'll
There's an
go to
interest.
the student body, not just to limited to the
Right.
student council.
Right, but she has her own way of going,
Yeah.
reaching
Well, I
out
just-
to the student
Right.
body, so.
Yeah, I just don't want to be,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Could be anybody.
You decide, I think we need one.
yeah.
To actually become members of the school board? Because that does
I mean-
exist.
Sure, but I think we have to talk about the
Maybe the
impact. I
next
think
step.
there's, see if there's interest.
Right.
Right.
I'm
And then
certainly
we'll figure out how
sure
to
that
do
we
it.
would,
Can they vote?
Then we can make it
we're willing to have
happen.
that conversation, we
Yeah.
did.
You can empower them to vote or not, that's your choice.
Oh, to vote on the board? Yeah, you can do it either way.
That's the only way you're gonna get it here, if they have a real voice.
There's
If they
different
can vote.
kinds of
Yeah.
feedback on
I
that,
mean,
but.
really.
you-
How
We're
many
gonna have
people
to
go to
look
a
into
informational meeting? Not for me.
Okay, so I'm looking at this.
Because there's been-
Treasurer, auditor, Stephen, you're
My
suggesting we
question
take
is,
out.
Frank, maybe you know the answer to this, but we used to have an article in here, Article 7, that says, to see if the voters will authorize the Board of School Directors to retain the service of a professional auditing firm. Well, obviously, if you're electing auditors, it may be important to clarify that. But from my point of view, the state law says we have to have an annual professional audit of Leland Gray Union School District, and why we have to ask the voters to approve something that is already legally obliged.
I agree, I think you should eliminate it.
I'm in favor of
Okay,
this. I'm in
that's
favor of
fine,
this
as long
order.
as we are okay with the legality of that.
Well, I'll check it, but I keep paring down
If I
these
recall
articles.
correctly, we actually had a conversation to that effect
That's what I
at our
thought too.
last annual meeting.
Well, didn't we were talking about whether or not
We were talking about whether
elected
we
auditors.
needed to have
Did we
elected
need them?
auditors.
Oh, I don't
And we
have
don't
four.
anymore.
But the
I
point
don't have
was,
four.
Because we are by
we
law
were
required to have an
Oh, I have
audit.
obliged
four.
to have
Oh, yeah, okay.
a professional audit.
Right. So I think you can. I would take it out.
4 is the auditor. There's that. 6 you need. See what salaries or allowances the district will pay its officers, directors, and treasurers.
That's number 8 here. You got it down later on?
2013. We don't have 8. What is this? 5, 6, we do, but that's this. So I don't know what, maybe it changed when you were
Yeah,
changing it? It's
No,
possible.
Well, that's not
Reset
changing
it as
number.
our own word?
Yeah, that's possible. But I mean, I wanted to leave those so we could reference it. Anyway, we got to pay officers, we know that. To set the date of annual meeting, that's one of them there, isn't it?
Yep,
Okay.
that's 7, which
And-
would now be 6, because we're 5, because we removed. What we're proposing we remove from the warning is simply to elect one auditor to serve from July 1st, 2013 to June 30th, 2016. Remove that because we eliminated the position of auditors, correct, last year. And to, if everyone feels comfortable with removing the authorizing the board of directors to return the services of a professional auditing firm, remove that. Other than that, the warning will be the same with the change in amounts and date.
It'll have elect a moderator, elect a clerk, elect a treasurer. It'll have pay the
salaries?
officers' salaries, and it'll have to set the annual meeting date for the first Tuesday in February of the year 2015. It will say
Conduct a public
public
information.
information meeting.
We'll change all the dates on that. Was the proposal.
6993818.
318. And then, it was seconded by whom?
Me.
Mike. Okay. Any other comments or questions? If not, all those in favor of the motion to approve the 2014 annual meeting warning, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion passes for that warning. We also have a second warning for the Australian ballot. And I'm assuming we need, the only change for the Australian ballot will again be dates and dollar amount. We will double check on the times that, and locations, because they're all in the warning. What it says is the legal voters of the Leland and Gray Union High School District Number 34, comprising the towns of Brookline, Jamaica, Newfane, Townsend, and Wyndham, are hereby notified and warned to meet in the town offices of the town of Brookline, town offices of the town of Jamaica, Newburgh Firehouse, Vermont Route 30 in the town of Newfane, the town hall in the town of Townsend, and the town offices in the town of Wyndham, respectively, on Wednesday, February, you got the date? Because I don't have the date right in front of me. He's gonna tell me in a second. To vote on the Australian ballot, it's the day after our annual meeting, so, hold on.
It's February 5th. Let me just check that. The date of Tuesday is the 4th, yes. It's
Okay,
Tuesday
so
the
it's the
4th
4th
and
is-
Wednesday the 5th.
Okay, Wednesday, the
Fifth
4th
is
is
the
the
vote.
annual meeting, the 5th is the Australian ballot vote. To vote on the Australian ballot, the following question, beginning at 9 a.m. in Brookline, 10 a.m. in Jamaica, 9 a.m. in Newfane, 9 a.m. in Townsend, 10 a.m. in Wyndham. Polls will close in all such towns at 7 p.m. And the only article on this one is Article 1, shall the Leland and Gray Union School District adopt a budget of $6,999,311, $318, right? To defray its expenses and liabilities for the 2014-2015 school year. So we need a motion on that.
I'll move to warn that one as well.
Okay,
Second.
Joe moved to warn the Australian ballot warning, and seconded by Mike.
I dated off this. This is my Word document.
Okay.
I think it's-
All right, fine. Okay, any other comments or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion passes. We've got our warnings. What
I
else?
put the date for executing these warnings on the 4th of January. Last year it was the 4th of January. I presume since, no, we're a day earlier this year, so we better go like January 2nd or something if we can. The 2nd is a Thursday.
Yeah, well, right, we're gonna direct you to warn it within the 30 to 40 day,
Exactly,
so.
yeah. And I'll change that date depending on when we sign it, but it's gotta be done at that time.
Yeah, and I mean, Allison was last year really good, which I had all here in front of me. When they all went out, she sent a packet to let us know when all the warnings were out,
Mike second.
in each of the towns,
Email you the warning that's gonna go in.
and sent to the reformer.
And the same with this.
So we'll follow the same strategy, if that's okay with all of you, for last year, that we did last year, because we sent warnings to the reformer, and I think we did it to the Commons, maybe, and we post them in all the towns. Okay? Anything else on budget?
Only article,
I have a-
that's all we got. This is dated on the 11th day of December. Now, this warning I could date earlier now. No, not really. We could date it, but we can't post it more than 2 weeks before.
I would suggest that, whatever date you put in there, that we didn't actually state it in our warning, but we said, make the motion to approve the warning as proposed with the revisions for the new day, new year dates and money. So just do the 30 to 40 days, since that's what we. You pick the day that's easiest for all of you. Since we're not the ones who actually do the
Maybe they
warning,
have
they
it
are.
here.
You don't care, do you?
No,
Okay. So the only other thing, we've got a couple of things here. Discuss vision of technology. We're awfully late. I don't know. I would also make one other suggestion. Jeremy, I didn't say this at the beginning of the meeting, and I should have. Jeremy had a family commitment he could not miss tonight, and so he was a little disappointed to miss the vision of technology discussion. So he'd be thrilled if we put this off to another time. So if that's okay, then he won't miss it. Frank,
The
I had
bubble is
added support
burst.
staff negotiations on here. Where are we on that? And you were gonna look that up and see if we had made a
The
motion.
vision of
Did you do
technology?
that?
I do not believe we did. We did co-curricular.
Okay, so, but
and
what
not
I
that.
wanted to make sure was we had a committee, and I thought maybe the co-curricular, appointment by Joe and I to do the co-curricular negotiations maybe covered the support staff, but I don't think it did, so I think it's better that we make a motion to approve, if Joe's willing to do it, and I'm willing to do it, to approve the two of us to negotiate it for whenever we set a date to start, so if somebody, does anyone want to do it?
Motion for yourself and Joe to support staff, is that what it is?
It's the support staff,
Negotiation.
this is just called support staff,
Educational
educational unit,
support staff.
educational support staff unit.
For the WCSU, Leland and Gray, and Newbrook.
That's what he needs.
Exactly, I make that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Sure.
Educational support
Okay.
staff agreement for WCSU, Leland and Gray, and Newbrook.
Support staff.
Education support?
It's
Educational support.
Educational
Yeah,
support staff negotiations.
Yep, and it's
We need to look at that.
WCSU,
Somebody take minutes.
Leland and Gray.
Yeah.
Who was the third one? WCSU, Leland and Gray,
Newbrook.
Newbrook.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. And it was moved by Joe, seconded by,
No, moved by Paul.
Paul. That's right, sorry.
Second.
Paul. Seconded by Dion. And are you willing to do it?
Sure.
Is it, no one else wants to?
Unless somebody
You
else
okay?
wants it.
If you're willing to do it, well, that's great.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
I think I may be legally obliged to invite the other boards,
Well, you can make your decision
but
on that.
that's not, you know, this may be a broader group of negotiators.
So,
In other words,
do we need to
you know,
state the
following the
dates?
pattern we have for the teachers is what I'm saying. Be prepared for that, don't be surprised if something happens that way.
Well, the current one we're renegotiating is those people, so the
That's
motion's
right.
fine.
That's motion's fine, I'm
We
just
would
saying
be
that it
adding
might-
others
might
in by a
end
motion
up
if
that,
we-
because I think I'm obliged to invite other boards that are,
Okay. There's
Part of
bills
the SU.
and
Can
pay
I
warrants.
can I ask
Sorry,
a
go ahead.
question?
Absolutely.
Because we
Sorry,
spent
Diane.
such, that's all right. Because we spent such time on the budget and it's, you know, glad you see the bubbles burst, but from my thinking forward, you had suggested that if we're looking at reducing or that is increasing the teacher-student ratio to become closer in alignment with what the state recommendation is, at what point do you want to start that discussion and what that would look like? Because I have to do quite a lot of analysis
Yeah.
before, and it's not that I haven't done it before, but it has, you know, you will have your own priorities, because I certainly prepare for the worst.
Can
But
I
I don't want to
respond?
prepare for the worst, so.
I think that the board would expect that you can say when you would have it available to us. I don't think
Yeah.
it's too early to start at any.
Oh, right.
So whenever you feel comfortable and you can get feedback to us, we're going to be here to listen. You want us to give you a date? We'll do it.
well,
You said-
I
No,
don't
I
think
think
tonight's the
that's
night to
to
do it
do.
Yeah.
precipitously. I think we should take it under advisement, Doreen, and see what the labor, you know, what we think would be a reasonable amount of time, then we could come back on this.
I think we're pretty
I
flexible.
think the board is pretty,
Are we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Pretty
wouldn't put a
positive
date on it. I'd
about-
just say, you know, as soon as you can,
And-
we're ready.
I think what I see is a timeline of events that we had in terms of engaging the various stakeholders in the discussion.
I think that realistically, we have a good chance that our budget will be defeated this
Right,
year,
exactly.
and we should be
Right.
prepared with an alternative at that point.
I'm thinking if we could have, I'm thinking on the same thing, I'm thinking if we could have even a framework of ideas, it could be something that could be presented at an informational meeting. And I think if we have a chance of passing that, we should give people the impression that we're thinking ahead. So, you know,
It's
I
an
think we
important
gotta
selling
put them
point.
together.
Yes.
I think this budget's gonna be a tough budget to pass, but if we have
So
a
at
framework.
At the
going
information
forward,
meeting, we have some framework.
I think that would help pass this
But
and get
it
us going.
doesn't need to be at that level. I mean, there's no way you have time to.
But it should be
pull
something,
that
I
kind of
think, to
research, but-
acknowledge where we are
What our thoughts are on how to.
and why we're
deal
coming with a budget like
Yeah,
this.
and recognizing that we need to plan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think we're gonna be,
Maybe even a time, you know, like an idea of our time frame.
puts us more in the driver's seat rather than reacting to a
Right.
budget vote that
Yeah.
we don't like.
Well, that's-
Yeah, it's like you said
that's
earlier.
Well, with any luck, it gives us a time frame of a
Ideas,
year.
ideas where we're going.
Yeah.
In terms of defending the budget, I mean, we have the same number of students expected to attend next year. I'm hoping that will increase, just like we had 15 new students register over the summer. So while we had a dip, it was an uptick, and now we're maintaining it, and our budget is really a maintenance budget. And with the understanding that if we really do see a decline of 16 and then, 34 over the next 2 years, that, we as a responsible board and administration are working on that. So I would foresee us doing that, I would say before summer, at least preliminarily, because the fall timeframe is quite short.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's.
So I think
While,
we
I mean,
oughta-
it has plenty of opportunity for public engagement, it's rapid.
yeah,
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
All
I
of a sudden,
think,
you find yourself right in November.
Exactly.
yeah.
and knowing what
Exactly.
the projections are, we know this isn't going away. We really do need to get on top of this quick. Earlier this year, much better.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, you know.
When Stephen's done making these
got it.
changes to all the two warnings, he will email them to all of us as well, right?
Yes.
You don't have to do it tonight.
No, I'm gonna do it right now, because if I don't
Okay.
do it now.
So we have bills and pay orders
Move to approve the bills and pay orders.
of $508,695.02.
Second.
Who seconded? I'm sorry, Patty. It's you. Okay. Any comments, questions?
They look
If
pretty
not,
good.
all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. We need a consent agenda motion.
Sure,
Approve
move
the
to
con-
approve the consent agenda.
Consent agenda only contains the minutes, and I'll thank Bruce again for doing the minutes. We're gonna put out I hope we're gonna put out a ad to try to find some.
Yeah, actually, I did put out an email, just, I think today, maybe we didn't get it out until today, but anyway, I put out an email to all of our email list and see if we could get somebody interested in taking minutes, and I said the price, the compensation was negotiable, because I didn't want to cut anybody off, and if the right person came forward. So, that's the status, and an ad could go out, although I don't know about an ad before the Christmas, before the holiday, but, you know, I think, I'll see how that goes. Allison originally thought she could make it tonight, but she's taking minutes at Jamaica and at the WCSU, right? She's been pretty busy, so
Yeah,
I
she
gotta
didn't
be
wanna
careful
take
not to
on-
burn that situation.
Allison didn't
out,
want to
but-
take on Leland and Gray, she told me pretty clearly.
Yeah.
Now,
Now,
do we need a second on the consent agenda? He's telling me we don't. I'm trying to remember if we do or we don't.
no, I think it's
It's
without
none.
objection, but you're okay. yeah.
All those in favor? And opposed? Okay, there's no, I'm assuming, executive session?
Right, we have none. I do want to mention to you, please do,
Oh, I've got something else too. Don't walk
please,
out.
when you get this email and you have these two attachments and two warnings, I would appreciate it if you would open them up and read them
Look.
carefully, because
It's easy to
obviously I'm in
overlook
the scramble
when we
here,
meet
and
all
I
the changes.
don't want to be, I don't want to, and, you know, we have time, right? The date for posting,
What
I put
happens
down
is
is not until,
We see the right thing in our mind's
January
eye,
third.
and it might not be correct on paper. I also want to mention that at our next meeting, we will be doing this, possibly, it will be on the agenda to do the superintendent evaluation. You'll get the email out at the end of this month, so I just wanted to mention that as well. Okay? The next meeting is January 14th.
Make a
There's a
motion.
red meeting on the 2nd of January.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, it's been moved.
Second.
Seconded by Mike. All those in favor? Aye. And opposed? No. Position to that. Wow, thank you all.